Hello, I'm Rebecca Flaherty, and this week I've got another free trailing floral template tutorial for you. That is a bit of a mouthful. This week we're going to be making this lovely floral pattern here. You can get the free template from the Pattern Maker's Toolkit over on my website, and the links for everything I'll mention today are in the description. For accessibility, all of my tutorials have fully edited subtitles, and all the chapters are marked in the description if you want to go ahead and skip to the beginning of the tutorial. These trailing floral templates are more advanced level tutorials, so if you've never made patterns using the diamond method in Procreate before, then I suggest checking out this video first, as it covers everything in much more detail and at a much slower pace. I've also got lots of beginner-friendly pattern tutorials on my channel, which will help you get better acquainted with the way I make my pattern repeats in Procreate. So let's get started. I'm using the Pattern Maker canvas here. It has these lovely seamless texture overlays, so I change the background colour to something a bit darker, and then we turn these textures on. You'll see it's got these lovely seamless texture overlays in there. We'll just undo that colour change for now. If you don't have the Pattern Maker canvas, you can still follow along. You'll need a 12-inch square canvas at 300 dpi, and then on an empty layer, all you'll need to do is draw a diamond like this one that goes all the way off the edges of the canvas on all four sides. That's what we'll use in our sketch layer, and that is the equivalent of, on the Pattern Maker canvas, the sketch diamond here. So we're going to start working on the draw here first layer. That's where we're going to draw our motifs, but first of all we need to bring in our template. So I'm going to come underneath the sketch diamond and I'm going to bring in my trailing floral template. So this is the template we're going to be tracing over. We need to illustrate all the motifs in black. The ones in blue will be made by duplicating the black ones around the edges, and then these pink ones on the edges are going to be made in our extra group. So let's jump straight in by adding some flowers to this. On my draw here first layer, which is an empty layer above the diamond, I'm going to stamp in some of these floral shapes, and I'm using this brush here called Linework Floral, which you can find in the Pattern Maker's Toolkit. And I'm just going to stamp this into the black circles. So it's just the black circles we need to fill. All of these blue ones will be made by duplicating these, which we'll do now. So once you have all those filled, you can merge this draw here first layer down with your sketch diamond. The reason I don't do them on that layer straight away is sometimes you might want to move things around and rotate them, and it's easier to do that before you've merged it down. So I'm going to duplicate this layer, tap to transform, and I've got snapping and magnetics on with distance and velocity all the way up, and I'm going to bring this down and snap it to the bottom, and then drag it and snap it to the side, and you'll see we've got all of these orange lines intersecting there so that we know it's in the right place. Then I'm going to duplicate the bottom layer again, drag it up and over to the left and snap it into place, and you'll see as I do this it's putting the flowers into all of these blue spaces there. And then we repeat that for the other side as well. So we've dragged the pattern out into all of these corners. So those four on the top, you can now pinch to merge those, and we've got those around the outside on one layer and the ones that are going to fill the black circles down the bottom still. So this top layer, I'm going to tap and I'm going to invert it. So when we come to illustrate this pattern, the only things that we need to draw are the lines in black and these flowers that are inside the black circles. All of these blue ones and these green flowers will be made by duplicating like we just did, but with the real motifs later. And then this pink one here we'll do later in our extra folder. So because I've got all my leaves mapped out and my stems, I'm not going to bother tracing over those on the sketch layer, which is how I would build a pattern if I wasn't using a template. If you want to change any of the elements up in here, for example, if you wanted to, let me just grab a brush. If you wanted to do things like altering some of the leaves, for example, if you wanted to make like that into 2 leaves, especially when you've got ones on the edges. So this one, if you wanted to make it go down there, something like that, then I would do these in your sketch layer, duplicate them around the edge so that you can check everything's lining up with everything else properly. But because I'm sticking to the template, I'm not going to bother sketching those out for this. So I'm going to go straight into my pattern folder. I'll turn that on, and on this layer here I'm going to draw in the stems. When we're working with these trailing floral templates, you'll see there's one stem that's in green rather than black, and that's the one that covers one edge of the canvas to the other. So it starts up here, crosses the canvas here, and then crosses this edge there. So by the time we get down to here, we're actually joining it back up with itself. So this should be the first one that you draw in. So I'll grab a nice dark colour for doing this so that you can see what we're doing. And I'm going to use the tracing crayon from my Pattern Maker's canvas brush set, and I'm going to turn up the stabilisation a little bit so we can draw a bit of a smoother line. So I'm going to start up here, follow the green line and draw down to there. If you try and stick as closely as you can to the green line, it will be a lot easier to join it up in a moment. So starting up there, draw all the way down to there, and then we're going to duplicate this down to there so that we can join the end up with it a bit more seamlessly. So to do that, we draw a line off the edges of this layer here, duplicate it, tap to transform, and we're going to snap this down into this corner until we have the orange lines just like we did with the sketch layer. So if we zoom in here, because I was careful to follow the green line as closely as I could, it's actually joined up pretty well. But if yours was looking kind of more like that and wasn't quite joined up properly, this is how you get them to join up. You go onto your main layer, the one with this part on it, take your eraser and just erase that line back a little bit, and then with your brush you can draw it and merge it down with where this line ends. So let's start here and just merge it down in with that line there. So now we know that we can have this continual line going across the edge of the canvas there, and it's going to merge perfectly there and up here as well, and that is what makes this a trailing floral pattern. So you can get rid of the top one now, that duplicated one, and then now this green line is in, you can go ahead and trace over all the black lines. I'm going to change this to a different colour though. I'm going to use this green here. And then once all the flower stems are in place, I'm going to do the stems for the leaves as well. Once all your stems are in place, we can draw the leaves in. So add a layer underneath the stems, and this is part of the reason I have these pattern markers in there, is so that you can easily add layers in from the bottom without having to add a layer on top and then drag it underneath if that was the bottom layer. That's just one of the ways the Pattern Maker canvas helps you save time when making patterns. So I'm going to use this lighter green, and for these leaves I'm going to do kind of like a sort of a wavy shape leaf with these, I think. So I'm going to still follow the overall shape of the leaf outline that's in the template, and I'm just going to add these little wavy shapes to the leaves. Then we're going to fill all of these leaves using colour drop. And I'm sure you know, when you fill shapes in Procreate and you've been using a textured brush, you get that kind of funny fuzzy halo around the edges of the fill like that, no matter how much you try and adjust the threshold. And then you have to go and trace over all those. Well, I've got a way to fill those without having to trace over each one of them. So we're going to duplicate this layer, tap on our adjustments up here, and we're going to put a Gaussian blur of 3% on this. Then we can hide this layer, zoom in so that we can see that gap that we're trying to fill, and then with our select tool on the hidden layer and automatic selection, tap in any of the negative space, and you want to adjust your threshold and bring it in so that it comes in past the edge of your shape and about halfway between this gap that we're trying to fill and that edge. Then you can tap invert. So now we have this area inside the edge of the shape selected. We can add a layer, tap and fill that, and that fills that smaller area just inside the leaf, and that should fill all of those gaps all in one go. Then you can delete the blurred layer and then merge those two together, and then that's all of those gaps on there filled. Apart from this one here, which I've just spotted that I didn't fill in the first place. and I will just trace around this one to save doing all that again. There we go. So the next part I'm going to draw is the middles of the flowers. I'll do that on the top layer, add a layer to do that, and I think we'll make these yellow to start with, but I'm probably going to change the colour of these later with a clipping mask. And for these ones, I don't mind if these are a little bit wobbly, so I'm going to just not do the draw and hold thing to snap these into perfect circles. These can be a little bit wobbly in this one. So we draw around all of those, and it's just the pink ones that we need to be drawing on this layer, or the ones that are inside these black circles. Remember, these ones are going to be made when we duplicate this around the canvas. So then we can colour drop, fill those, and I will also fill the gaps the same way as I did for the leaves. So now we can add a layer underneath these yellow middle bits and do all of our petals on this layer. And what I might do while I'm drawing these is actually drag this layer above so that I can see inside to make sure that I close all of those off, so that when I colour drop it, it stays inside the shape rather than going out like that. So when you're using that fill technique, if you've got two bits that are quite close together, you may notice that you get some of it touching there when you fill them. If I hide the select fill layer, this is what I started with, and where these were quite close together, the threshold kind of didn't quite catch those. So what you should do is on this layer, before you merge them down with your eraser, you can just go in and erase those gaps out before you fill that. So if you find that you're having issues with that fill, where it's merging stuff together, if you've drawn quite close together, that's how you can fix it. Before you merge them, just have a quick check, and then you can erase any splurgy bits on your top layer before you merge them together like that. So that's all of our flowers drawn in now, apart from adding the details. I'm going to move this sketch group up above the pattern so that we can see the bits we have to do, and I'm going to change the opacity on this to a bit lower and set it to linear burn. I can probably hide that one as well. So I'm going to have a bit of a play with the colours on this layer. So I'm going to add a layer above it, make it a clipping mask, and then I'm going to play around and mix up the colours of these flowers. So the next thing we have to tackle is putting this pink part in there. So I'm going to swipe down with 3 fingers, I'm going to copy all, and I'm going to come up here to my extra group and swipe down again with 3 fingers and tap paste. Just turn the textures off so we don't have 2 lots showing. And then we want to put these parts in the middle, so we duplicate, tap to transform, and snap this over to this edge, and snap this one over to that edge, and that's now brought our edges into the middle, and we can draw on this one without having to draw off the edge of the canvas. So I'm going to add a layer and then just draw this in, merge it down with there the same way as we did in the pattern group. So now we can add a bit of shading to these leaves. We'll start here, and then we know that the extra group is all done. So I'm going to add a layer, clip it down, change the blend mode to color burn 40%. Then I'm going to use my trusted method of using a 50% grey, and we'll grab a textured brush, and I'm just going to add a bit of that texture to the bottoms of these leaves, and then I'll duplicate this layer. I can clear it and change the blend mode to color dodge this time, so this will make it lighter, and then we can just add a touch of that to the tops of the leaves. So that is our extra group done with now. We can hide that one until we come to build the highlight later. So now I'm going to repeat that shading on all of the leaves on this layer. And now I want to add a little bit of shading like that to the petals as well. So over the top of this clipped layer here, I'm going to put another clipping mask and use color burn 40% and my 50% grey to add a bit of shading coming out from underneath the middle bits. Then I'm going to add another layer in, make this one colour dodge 40% to do some lighter touches to the outside of the petals. And then for the line work here, I'm going to add another colour burn layer. We'll start off with this one at 100%, but well, actually, no, let's change the opacity to 40 for this. And I'm going to use this line details brush here, and I'm just going to change the blend mode on this to something that's not going to interfere with seeing. Let's make it colour dodge. So I've just changed the blend mode on the sketch layer to colour dodge, and then on this layer here we've just added colour burn 40%. I've got 50% grey and my line details brush. I'm just going to draw in over these lines like this. If I hide the sketch, you can see that's how those are looking. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that for all of these flowers now, and I will do you the favour of fast forwarding through that because it's going to take me a while. So that's all of that layer done, although I'm sure I'll probably find some more that I've missed as I go along. So now we can add those details to the flower middles. So above the middles layer, I'm going to add a layer, make it a clipping mask, and this one again is going to be colour burn 40%. And I'm going to use the mini dot brush from my brush set here and just stamp over all of these little dots there, making sure this is about the right size first. And then I'll just repeat that for all of these. So I think that's all of those done. A quick easy way to check is if you tap on the layer and tap select, you can then more easily see that everything's got blobs on it, and it does. So that's all done. Just deselect that. So all that's left to do is just add a little bit of shading onto these middle parts, the same as we've done for the leaves and the flowers, so that they match. So underneath that layer we've just done, so tapping on the middle yellow parts, I'm going to add a layer, make this one colour burn 40%. And I'll grab my texture brush again and just put a little bit of texture onto the bottoms of these, and then I can add another layer in between there, make this one colour dodge 40%, and then add a bit of highlight to the tops of those. And then I'm going to go and repeat that for all of the ones on this layer, doing all the colour dodge first and then doing all the colour burn. And then what I want to do is see if I can make these dots stand out a bit more. So I'm going to hide my sketch layer and play around with the blend mode and opacity on this and see if we can't get these to stand out a bit more. So might just change the blend mode up to the opacity up to 50% on those, and that should be enough. I'm just wondering if I want to use a more brighter yellow on these. I turn the textures on and let's alpha lock this layer and try using this yellow instead. I think I'm going to stick with that one, that looks much more cool. So that's all of our illustrating done now, and we can now build out the pattern tile. So I'm going to start by hiding this marker on the pattern layer, and then we can collapse this layer, and you can either duplicate this group and flatten the whole group if you have plenty of layers spare, or if you're short on layers, just hide everything except that group, swipe down with 3 fingers, copy all, come up to the top here, swipe down again and tap paste. Then we can turn our pattern group off. I'll turn that duplicate off. Then we can turn the extra group on. We can delete those parts now because we're done with those. And I will just duplicate and flatten this group, but otherwise you could do the same, copy all and then paste. So let's turn the background colour on and hide our layers so they don't interfere with any of the snapping in a moment. So this we'll deal with first. We need to put this over to the edges of the pattern tile. So we'll put a mark in each of these corners going off the edges of the canvas. We'll duplicate it, and just like we did with the extra group when we pasted the canvas and put the edges into the middle, we're doing the opposite of that now, putting the edges back on the outside. So this one underneath, we can bring that over there, pinch to merge those two together and get rid of those 2 marks. Now we can show this group, and you can see there where we put that in, that blends in seamlessly with what we already have illustrated there. So now we can pinch and merge those two together, and we can build out this tile, duplicating it and putting it into the corners like we did with our sketch group. We've already got this mark drawn off the corners, so we don't need to add another one of these, so we can just go ahead and do that now. Making pattern tiles like this in Procreate is how I make all of my patterns these days for both personal and professional projects. This part though I normally do in Photoshop. I've got an automation set up to convert the pattern folder to a smart object and then automatically duplicate it around the canvas just like I am here. It's so quick and easy, and I can do it just by pressing one button. Using smart objects means you don't have to flatten anything, and you can edit a part of the pattern and it will update anywhere that part is repeated. In terms of quality, it's absolutely fine to do that part here in Procreate, but if you want max speed and editability in your workflow, then Photoshop smart objects are definitely the way to go. And there we go, that is our finished pattern tile. We can turn the textures on now, and you can see that come alive with all that lovely texture built into it there. So the great thing about using a diamond repeat like this in Procreate is that you know you're going to get no gaps when you upload to Spoonflower. But before we save and export, it's always good to test your repeat here in Procreate. So we can do that by swiping down with 3 fingers, tapping copy all, come right up to the top here, swipe down again and tap paste. Now I'm going to add a layer underneath that and fill it with a really dark colour so that if there's any gaps on the edges of the pattern, like those little semi-transparent gaps that you can sometimes get, those will show through. So we can fill this layer. On our pattern tile here, tap to transform, and we're going to drag this up here and snap it into this corner, set the width to 1800 pixels and the height to 1800 pixels. Then we can duplicate, drag this over here, and then just zoom in and show and hide that so that you can just see that seam there and know that there's not any of those semi-transparent gaps along the edges of your main tile. Then you can pinch to merge those two together, duplicate, tap, drag it down, and then just zoom in again and make sure that there's nothing suspicious going on there either. Once you know that's fine, you can pinch to merge those two together, and that is now your finished pattern. Don't forget you can get the stamp brushes and template when you join the Pattern Makers Toolkit. It's kind of like a Patreon group, and the best part is it's free to join. You get access to all the resources in the Pattern Makers Toolkit on my website, including those I make for my Skillshare classes, early access to some of my YouTube tutorials and drawing prompts, discounts in my Etsy store, and one new freebie exclusively via email every month. Talking of my Etsy store, that's where you'll find the Pattern Maker canvas and brush set, as well as some premium trailing floral template sets just like the one we've used today. If you want to learn more about my Procreate to Photoshop workflow using automations and smart objects, you can find that over on Skillshare. If you're new to Skillshare and you sign up using the link below, you'll get an extra 30 days for free. From now on, I won't be posting my artwork on Instagram anymore because of their new AI updates to their privacy policy. I've switched to using a platform called Kara for sharing my art and connecting with other artists. Kara is a social media and portfolio platform for artists that filters out generative AI images so that people who want to find authentic creatives and artwork can do just that. I've been delighted to connect with a lot of you over there already, and it just feels like a really refreshing, creative and exciting new community to be part of. My username over there is @Becky Flaherty, the same as it was on Instagram, so I'd love for you to join me over there on Kara and share your patterns and tag me so I can see your versions of this tutorial. I just want to point out I am not sponsored by Kara or anything. I was not asked to promote them. I just really like using that platform as an alternative to Instagram. And don't forget to subscribe here if you want to see more pattern tutorials like this every Wednesday. That's all from me today. Have fun, stay creative, and I will see you next time.